Hey everyone, here we are back. Missed a week, but Matt kept the torch burning with Dave Menichello last week as they spoke about how to talk to your board. This week, a little bit of a different topic, basically getting into penetration testing. Since it's a question that we get very often in this field, is how to get started. We have myself, Matt Wilson, and then also Matt Barnett on the line. Basically, just going to run through a couple different things, and I hope it'll be a good conversation. I think so. My background and kind of how I got into it, I was actually doing some secure network setup for a couple of defense and intelligence contractors, kind of tweaked my interest into some of the offensive pieces of it. And I just happened into a job where that's what I was doing. So I was pretty lucky, got in with the right people in that first consulting job. And it worked out really well to me, and continued to kind of hone my skills back in, 98, 99. So I think for me, it was just luck, but it was also finding the group within the consulting organization that I was in that was actually tasked with doing those technical penetration tests and kind of learning from there and just, like I said, tweaking skills, learning from my peers there. I don't know what experience you guys have in terms of how you got into the field. I know it's definitely changed over the years, though.
Yeah, are we going in like age order here or something, right? So Ron, then me, then the young buck.
That's rude. Go ahead.
All right. So for me, similar luck story. Like I started at an audit firm and an IT audit and realized pretty quickly that I didn't want to be an auditor forever. No hard feelings for the auditors out there. Just it's not me. It wasn't for me. And similar kind of, they also had an InfoSec group. Did a little bit of work with them. Realized that was more up my alley. And the line I will stress is I was always a passable penetration tester, but I had the opportunity to work with a lot of really bright people. So that's where I picked up anything worthwhile. How about you, Barnett?
Yeah, I kind of spun one of those, what do you want to do for a living career wheels, and it landed on security. So I applied to BTB and you guys, uh, no, I actually went to school to be a programmer, and I got out of college. Actually, I was still doing my internship, and I showed up for day one ready to write some code. And the same day I showed up, the guy that ran all of their infrastructure quit. And they said, "Hey, Barnett, I know you had dreams on being a programmer, but you're now the head of infrastructure. Good luck." I said, "Well, what's a Linux?" And they laughed and then got very scared. So
yeah, the prospect of you being head of anything is scary.
Still is, man. It's for all this heroin. But the thing was, the guy that had been doing that job never really took an interest in doing things in kind of a secure way. And so it wasn't very long before the infrastructure was hacked and they had some crypto miners going on. And so they had me jump in there and do some investigation and try to figure out where it went. It was very much OJT, on the fly kind of learning, and realized that I really liked that kind of work. So I made it my mission to run around and harden all of the servers in their environment, including the ones they didn't ask for, but that's a different story. And then I basically ran myself out of stuff to do in their world. And so I started poking around and seeing what else I could do. And I ultimately ended up here, hanging out with you fine folks, and took my skill set to the offensive side and started just
took your talents to Bala Kinwood. Is what you're saying?
That's right. Yeah.
It's weird how everybody has a different path, and it's always so funny, like when you're at conferences or meetups or whatever, because people always say like, well, I'm trying to get into security. And then, the next logical question is always, well, what specifically do you want to do in security? Because there's like a million and one different possible iterations of a job. And then, I don't know.
Especially now, right? There's invented titles. Look at me. Great example of a totally made up title.
Yeah. And I mean, like statistically, I don't know how many people have said it to me, but it's always like, well, ultimately I want to do penetration testing. And I hate to roll my eyes so hard at that, but it's kind of like, okay, well, it's good to want to do that, but like, what steps are you taking to do that? Which kind of brings up that next conversation, which is, what are the top skills, or how do we mentor people to tell them what it takes to be a good pen tester? And it's funny because, going back sometime in history, if you want to talk about sort of the beginnings of the people at BTB, right? I was one of the people that hired Chris McGinley, who's one of the other managing partners at BTB. And Chris had done security through his administration at a chemical company, but he didn't have any penetration testing experience. And one of the things, or one of the stories that I always talk about when people were asking about how to get into security and specifically pen testing, was that, I was showing Chris basically like, net use commands, and he knew them, but it was like net and connecting to different resources and then trying to enumerate, obviously, some pieces of the Windows network, and, guessing, going from a null session and then potentially guessing username and password. I mean, this is going back some years. And Chris's first reaction was, well, if you write a for loop, you could just feed in a list of usernames and passwords to potentially just iterate that. And I looked at him and I went I looked at him and I went, you could do that, or you could use this tool called NAT to do that, right? And it was at that point, it was like his first week that I was like, he's going to be fine. Like, he knows what he's doing. And it's, to me, it's more about critical thinking and being that puzzle solver, that problem solver, that is probably the skill that, to me, it can't be taught. I don't know what you guys think, though, as far as.
And that's not what people want to hear, though, right? But go ahead, Matt. But that's not what people want to hear. People don't want to hear. They want, like, read this book and then I'm done, right? But go ahead, man.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I lost my voice. You know what a null session is?
Very funny.
No, you know what? You're not wrong, though, right? It's a mindset more than it is anything. If you think about the early days of e-commerce and buying things on the web, if it's who in their right mind would have thought to put in a negative number for a quantity and then not only get that many products, but also get a refund for negative whatever times the product cost? So the people that have the mindset to just break things or just exploit them in a way that nobody else is thinking to exploit them, those are the skills that, like Ron said, you can't teach.
For me, it's okay.
No. Just in doing some hiring and over the years, that's one of the things that I started looking for more so than what certs you have and what you did. Like, tell me about how you think. Like, how do you go about solving problems? Where's your brain at? And that's what I would look for.
Yeah, for me, it was that you have to be willing to get really frustrated and work your way through it on your own. If you're the kind of person that needs like a manual on how to do everything, you're not going to survive in this field. But I think that's why Ron's example with Chris illustrates that mindset so well, because you have to come up with an idea that maybe it's perfect, maybe someone else has already thought of it and it's terrible and they've improved on it. But whatever it is, there's no like script to do it. You can follow scripts, you can follow outlines on how to pen test, and plenty of that stuff's out there. And that works. But when you're the person under a time crunch in the middle of a project with potentially a client looking over your shoulder, right? Because they want to see the cool thing. And that's the other thing I think we get into. Like, people have this perception of pen testing that's like guys in hoodies, like you have as your background, Matt, doing really cool stuff all the time. But we know the reality is the cool stuff, it's like kind of police, like law enforcement, right? Like 1% hell on wheels, 99% sitting in the car. And that's a lot what penetration testing is. And that's part of that mentality mindset, being willing to be frustrated with a bunch of dead ends and work your way through it.
There's a shortcut piece to it too, right? Everybody thinks you start at penetration tester. Maybe they even think you start at threat operations analyst, right? But the reality is you start by understanding, because you can't break something. Well, you can, but traditionally, to really do a good job assessing something and assessing the security specifically, you have to understand how it works and where it's maybe vulnerable to start poking. Otherwise, you're just, you're running tools that somebody else wrote, and you don't have to be in security to run somebody else's tools. So I think
you do have to understand what those tools do. I mean, I think that's what we see a lot of times now. It's the push button pen testers who are, propped up by the fact that they can get a tool to just do these things. The problem is that, it may work 80% of the time, but that time where there's a slight configuration change that needs to be made or a variable that doesn't match up with what the tool's configured to do, they're not sure what to do with it, right? And instead of having the knowledge of how that tool is made in the background of it and just tweaking the script on their own and applying it and then maybe getting in, they're like, oh, well, it's not susceptible, right? It's not vulnerable. Nobody could break into this. And that's where I think the difference between, a good pen tester or a good red team or, whatever we want to call it this week is versus the people that are just kind of getting in and doing the push button pen testing. I don't know. I mean, I think this is like probably tip of the iceberg as far as conversation. I know we could probably talk for another half an hour if we wanted to, but time is kind of short. Wink, wink, meaning that we should be wrapping up. I know that next week we're going to be talking about how to interview for InfoSec positions, but I think since this was so compressed, maybe we come back and talk about, good pen testers and what the qualities are another time, if you guys are up for it.
I think so. Maybe we quick recap for folks that stay to the end. It's have the right mindset, have the follow through. If you go download Kali Linux, that's cool, but it's more than just Kali Linux, right? There's plenty of tools out there. It ain't about the tool. It's about knowing what to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And always practice in a safe world because, we're a land of saints and sinners, and not every tool is written by a saint. So
yeah,
be careful. Very,
very true. Well, thank you, Matt. Thank you, Matt. And like I said, next week, different topic on how to interview, but we'll come back to this one at some point.
Sounds good. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.